You know what's interesting? Since we've been doing this show, it's caused me to reflect a lot,
Mm,
right? So I literally have more candid conversations with the kids now.
mhm,
I sat down with my daughter and said, "How do you feel about your parents?"
mm.
Right? Like, what are your thoughts? Just to see if they're willing to communicate in that fashion. Will they talk to me about feelings?
Let's go, let's go, let's grow, let's grow, let's get it.
What's going on, y'all? Good to see you again. Thank you for listening in. I am Carlos V. Spencer.
And it's your boy, Coach Rod.
Yes, sir. We're here with Black Dad Unfiltered. We're going to be unfiltered. I mean, we're going to talk about some stuff that may not be a popular opinion, or for the most part, we ain't going to filter stuff, right? Pun intended. So for
Facts.
today, our topic for discussion is we're still dealing with the series, How to Raise Black Sons in America. We've been dealing with that series for a while. You can catch some of the episodes that we've done leading up to this one. But today, specifically on how to raise Black sons in America, we're going to deal with education. So, how to raise Black sons in America overall. So, we're talking about how to raise Black sons, but more specifically, how to raise Black sons when it comes to educating our Black sons. And man, I don't want to jump the gun, but man, education wise, didn't we hear something about your son? Am I wrong? Am I saying too much?
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully he watches the show, right? But my son just received acceptance into Tulane, and he's going to be going to Tulane next year, and 90% of the tuition is covered, brother. So
That's
we're
blessing.
proud. We're extremely proud. He's put in that work.
That's blessing, man. That's a blessing for sure. So we're gonna jump into that, man. For me, just even before diving into the first segment, we got two segments of the day. Just how's fatherhood been for you? Last week or so, since the last time we talked, how's fatherhood been treating you?
You know what's interesting? Since we've been doing this show, it's caused me to reflect a lot,
Mhm,
right? So I literally have more candid conversations with the kids now.
mhm,
I sat down with my daughter and said, "How do you feel about your parents?"
mm,
Right? Like, what are your thoughts? Just to see if they're willing to communicate in that fashion. Will they talk to me about feelings? You know what I mean?
mhm,
And then really talking to my son, because again, he's older, he's getting ready to leave the house. At this age, they want their freedom, they want their autonomy. Still having to make you understand that you're under my roof, but still talk to you in a way that you know that I'm going to respect your transition and your coming of adulthood.
mhm.
So it's been a learning experience, but thanks to us talking and talking out loud and talking in front of hopefully millions of people, it's really caused me to say, am I practicing what we're talking about? Can I get better? So I've been growing and I've been enjoying it.
That's dope, man. We constantly say we want to change the narrative, right? We want to show,
Hmm.
put a light on Black fathers. I'm hoping somebody who is listening in right now or watching in heard that, and that encourages them to share. That encourages them to share with their children as a father and a son. And when I say a son, I'm not saying that you have to be a child as a
Hmm.
son. You can be
Hmm.
an adult as a son, and it's still encouraging to have a conversation with your father. One reason why I say that before we break right into this other segment is my father's no longer living, right? So when I hear things like that, you having that conversation with your son, not only am I aware of having a conversation with my own sons, man, I wish I could have a conversation with my father. Like I wish I could talk to him. My father would always say, "When I'm gone, you're gonna
Hmm.
miss me." He never said it with an attitude. He never
Hmm.
said it with anger. He wasn't upset. He wasn't irate. But he said that, and my brothers and I, we remember him saying, "When I'm gone, you're gonna miss me." So for
Hmm.
those of you listening already, and you heard Coach Rod talking about having a conversation with his son, if you haven't had that conversation with your son or with your children, have that conversation. This is the sign. Sometimes people are looking for a sign. This is
Hmm.
your sign. You're watching here. You're listening here. Go have that conversation with your child, whether it be your son, whether it be a daughter. And if you are a child or even adult, and you have a parent, you have a father to go and speak to, have that conversation with them as well. Just put that nudge on yourself to say, it may not be here always. I'm not wishing tragedy on anybody, but
Hmm.
oftentimes I've seen people who've had fathers in their life that they kind of take it for granted. And when the father is no longer there, they look back at the time saying, wow, I wish I took more advantage of having my father. So, man, it's dope hearing that from you, Rob. We're going to break into our first segment of the day. And typically with our first segment of the day, again, we like to change the narrative, expand the narrative. And what I mean by that is put a light on fathers, on Black fathers. We see enough and we hear enough in the media and social media nowadays of a lot of negative things about fathers. So in this first clip, it actually, as you watch it, you're going to see it ties into a segment that we did in another episode. Talking about education, so we want to get into that part of it, and that's really what I want to pull out of it. Although, Rod, it may go to some other places, but when you watch this clip, watch the education portion. Watch how a father in this scene is teaching his children, and this scene is from the movie The Hate You Give. If you've seen that movie from some time ago, I won't go into the full story of what the movie's about, but this is the very beginning of the movie, and it's interesting how they started this movie off at the table with a family and with a Black father teaching and educating his children. Take a listen into this clip here. We're going to jump right into this.
Los, before we jump in, let's just warn our audience a little bit. We'll hold some show, but you may hit just one word of profanity. All right. So just warning you ahead of time.
Yes. Got you. Perfect. Perfect. Listen in here and see what you can grab.
My bad. Now, one day y'all gonna be with me, and you best bet we gonna get pulled over. Now, that don't mean I did something wrong. Maybe I made a mistake driving, or maybe I ain't do nothing at all. You gonna see me with my hands like this on the dashboard. Come on. Now you keep your hands posted, because moving makes the police get all nervous. If I ain't with you, you ask for me. It can get real dangerous, so don't argue with them. But keep your hands where they can see them. This is how you gonna act. We straight?
I was 9 years old when I first got the talk. 7, my half-brother, was 10. Sakani was 1.
Now, just because we gotta deal with this mess, don't you ever forget that being Black is an honor, because you come from greatness. Now, this is the Black Panther 10-point program. This our own Bill of Rights. I want you to learn it, because I'm gonna ask you about it, I'm gonna quiz you.
Really, Maverick?
Know your rights. Know your worth. You understand?
So, again, Coach Rod, we see this scene here. We hear what's going on. A father at the table. If you're seeing this, if you're listening in, you're hearing this on the podcast, but you may not have seen the picture. It's a father with his wife, with his children at the table. He's educating them. He's teaching them. And what he says, something we've touched on before, not if I get pulled over, but when I get pulled over. He starts to educate his children on what I need you to do. And not only is he educating them by word, he's also showing them some of the things that I believe that he believes that his children should do in order to keep them safe. And from an education perspective, or even from a law perspective, what's some of the things you pulled out, Rod?
So one of the biggest thing I pulled out, right? And I want to make sure I take my time and say this.
Yeah.
Is when he pulled out the pamphlet and said, these are the Black Panthers 10 points. I need you to learn it, and I will quiz you on it. And I know we're talking about education, but for those of you who may not be familiar with the 10 points, our right to freedom, our right to employment, removal from prison systems. The 10 points was drafted in 1966, right? And so to think about in 1966, and now we're in 2024. And as we talk about the show and some things we talked about already, and we're going to continue to talk about, it was evident to me that there must be a constant cycle of educating our children beyond the classroom in this system, right? Because remember, the topic today is educating Black sons in America, right? So when I watched it, I watched what he was saying. Then I watched how young the children were, right? And I started saying to myself, when do you start doing this? When do you start preparing your children? Then I looked at the person that he really focused on in the clip. And if the folks watch the clip, was his daughter, right? And then so I said, young children, a daughter, uh, very deliberate, very patient, very calming. But however, the topic is not enjoyable, yet it still had to get done. And then what were you providing them on top of that? So what were you educating them for?
Mhm.
Right. So it's layered. It's so layered. And so when I watched it, I said, this is very, very powerful clip. Me being a former adjunct professor, this is just a powerful clip. And when I watched it, and it had me reflect on the principles I tried to implement in my own family. So Lois, I'm looking to see how you're gonna unpack this so we can talk about it.
Man, and for this first segment, because for second segment, we're gonna jump a little bit further. For me, one of the importance we constantly do in our first segment is, how does this change the narrative?
Mhm.
And one thing for me that changed the narrative is seeing a Black father at the table with his children, teaching them.
Mm.
You don't see that often or hear about that often, right?
Yeah,
You hear
yeah.
about
Mm,
fatherless children, right? You
mm,
hear about, oh man, they made this mistake or they did this because they must not have a father, right? You hear
mm.
that.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so not only was that powerful, but it was also powerful to see, like he talked about the points. I'm gonna quiz you on this. I
mhm,
want you
mhm,
to
mhm.
know your rights. I want you to know this information. So at face value, you could look at the clip and you could say, "Oh man, that's a situation where it seems like you're taking away power from somebody. Like you're trying to tell your child to
Mm-mm.
be a coward, to tell your child don't do anything." Like it wasn't that. So to
No.
also change the narrative, one, again, you see a father teaching his children. Two,
Mhm.
you see a father teaching his children the importance of having information and how that information can be power for you.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I like how you framing that. So, I go completely left, right? I'm left brain, right
Let's
brain.
do it.
When you said at the table, first of all, the table itself has significant spiritual connotations to it, right?
Mhm.
So when you talk about we're at the table together, and if you do anthropology, one of the keys to keeping a family together is eating together, taking time to decompress together. Um, what is it that we talk about? Getting off, let's say, social media, right? Getting the distractions and just staying at a table. So when you said that, I was like, I didn't even pay attention to that part.
Mhm.
And to your point, what on its surface could appear as you're training your kids into a system, conversely, it's I'm empowering them within the conditions which they have to be raised in so that they can see another day. Bro, you just blew my mind when you put that together. And then again, us, I'm just thinking the word table means a lot
Yeah, it
throughout
definitely
history.
does. In this clip,
Mhm.
raising Black sons in America,
Mhm.
it's important for me when it comes to Black fathers teaching our children this, because like he said, I know it was a movie scene, not if I get pulled over,
Mhm.
but when I get pulled over.
Mhm.
I've actually had that conversation with my son verbatim. Son, unfortunately, there'll be a day, and I'm big on positive words, right? I'm a big person. So anybody listening and watching this, like, nah, you speaking negative. No, I'm real big on positive words, but I'm also real big on educating my son. And I
Mhm.
bring that up because I remember having a meeting, Rod, and it was with some of my white counterparts. And I remember us being in the
Mhm.
room. It was about
Mhm.
maybe 15 or 20 adults in the room from this
Uh-huh.
organization.
Sure.
It was maybe a handful of blacks, and maybe about maybe 70% of the room were white. And I remember saying in that room, I've had the talk with my son. And how many of you have had that talk? And all the black adults knew what I was talking about. My white counterparts had no idea what they thought. We were talking about the birds and the bees and sex when we talked about the dog, right?
Yeah.
But for us, we knew it was that talk of what do you do when unfortunately, going to that meeting, I told them I drove by a police car on the way to this meeting, and I was nervous driving by the police car.
And you were a cop.
And I listen. You
Man,
took
you
the
were a
words out
state
of my mouth.
trooper. Yeah.
You took the words out of my mouth. So it is important for us to teach our sons, to teach our children, because I don't want my children to learn this on their own or have to learn this by experience and not know what to do and not have the right information to pull from. I've often said this, and I'll let you jump in and finish this session out. I've often said if you have multiple choice tests, you have A, B, C, and D as your answers, typically, maybe an E, all the above. But if you have a multiple choice test and you only have A as an option, and A is the only answer you're going to choose. So I bring that up to say, with my children, I want to educate them and give them information and give them other options so that they aren't just pulling from one answer.
Gotcha.
I must do that as a black father.
So what's interesting, because I heard you use the word teach a lot, right? And the topic today is education. And I'm curious if people are watching or listening, are they equating education with these lessons and principles? Are they equating education to the formal level of education, which is math, calculus, sociology, academia, right? So it's funny how much you say teaching that. And I wonder if our peers, our fellow Black fathers, or anyone who's in a position to influence young youth would consider themselves educators if they changed the lens of what they were teaching, right? So if to make that clearer, would you consider yourself an educator if you realize teaching someone how to change a tire, teaching someone accountability, teaching someone discipline, if that was actually the most important part? I just did a session when I trained about 42, 45 business owners. Statistically, because of AI, most technical positions will be replaced through artificial intelligence.
Say that
The
one more
most
time.
Because of AI, artificial intelligence, most technical positions will be replaced,
Wow.
right? The most valuable asset by 2030 will be your soft skills. Most employers are going to value soft skills. You don't learn soft skills in school, Los. But anyway, I don't want to get ahead of it. But that teed me up when the way you framed it, you got me started. The way you framed it, I was like, I wonder if we look at this and saying, yo, I'm an educator. I'm the first educator in this child's life, not only through modeling my behavior, but with some level of intentionality on my end.
Listen, we in it. We in it now. Second segment of the day. We're talking about raising Black sons in America, and we're dealing with the subtopic of education. So we're in education, man. I want you to flow a little bit more on that little piece. On that piece, I ain't gonna say little piece. On I am the first educator, because when you hear the topic of education, as you and I even talked about, I think a lot of people may think about in the traditional sense in a classroom. Whether that be high school, whether it be middle school, college, however you think. Most people may be thinking that's the place. And I've said this many times, and I believe this. School is not the place where your child should be raised. It should continue there, but it should start and finish at home. So when I send my child to school, I'm not expecting the school to do everything. I'm expecting them to enhance what I do. Here it is. I couldn't say this any better. My grandfather said when I was going to get my master's in theology, he told myself and my other brothers and other people who came up as preachers under him, he said that school won't make you a knife. It'll just sharpen the knife.
Get your Shannon Sharp on, Los.
Listen. You know,
on.
that's
Come on,
what
Los.
my grandmother said to me. The school will never make you a knife. It will
Mhm.
only sharpen the knife.
Mhm.
So if school's going to sharpen the knife, then like you just said, somebody needs to be the first educator to make the knife so
Mhm.
the knife can begin to be sharpened. Can you
Yeah.
expound on that a little bit about being the first educator? Because most people might be thinking about traditional education.
So once I had my son, some 19 years ago, right? I went through the process of figuring out how am I going to get you to this finish line, which means how do I get you to a place where you can be a provider, protector, have quality of life, and have joy in your life.
Mhm.
And a few interesting things started happening along their journey. Once I started teaching at the college level, I realized something. So what we're really focusing on right now is making sure that these kids are able to understand what they're reading.
Mm.
And I, as an instructor, I fill in the gap. I introduce a topic, and then I test you to see if you retain the knowledge, and I put you in the positions where you have to apply the knowledge, right?
Mhm.
But ultimately, the responsibility of learning fell on the student.
Mhm.
So then I said, huh, so really the key is teaching my kids how to think and how to
Mhm.
teach themselves,
Mhm.
right? And so that started my journey now of shifting how my kids learn. And then I took on the responsibility of saying, I am your first educator,
Mhm.
which means now my sole purpose is to teach you how to think. And equally importantly, is not to teach you how to think outside the box, but to stretch the capacity of your box. Right? Do you get what that means?
Yes.
Go
Yeah.
ahead. You want to say something to me? I must have hit a chord. Go ahead.
No, you definitely hit the core.
Yeah.
You definitely hit a core because I'm hearing you say that we need to teach our sons, to teach our children how to be able to learn and prepare them so that they can be taught. So when I hear
Yeah.
you saying that, that
Mhm.
means they shouldn't go to traditional education and now learn how to learn. They should learn information, and from having a Black father in their life, that benefit is I'm learning information, but somebody already taught me how to be taught. Somebody already
Okay. Mhm.
prepared me how to
Mhm.
learn. So
Mhm.
now I'm not in this educational setting learning how to learn. I'm learning the information that I'm being taught because my father already taught me how to learn.
So man, listen, I'm gonna put the cat out the bag, Los. Depending, so at certain institutions, certain levels of learning, what you get taught is how to memorize,
Oh, you hit it. You hit
right?
it
That's what
there.
you get taught.
You hit
So
it.
two things we got to talk about because now I'm all over the place, but you're gonna have to reel me in. We often say we need more people that look like us in the classroom in front of our students, in
Mm,
front of our children.
yeah.
Well, you look like your kid. You be that
Ooh.
person that's in front of them. You
Ah.
get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying, but you gotta say
Right.
it again because I gotta make sure the listeners get what you're saying.
No, think about it, right? So we always say there's not enough black men in teaching
Mm,
in public schools or in schools, and our
wow.
children don't get taught by people that look like us. Well, you look like your child. Get in front of them and start teaching.
Mm,
Los,
wow.
we're going down the rabbit hole now.
But it's a good one.
My son was learning history, right? And one of the things I realized is depending on where you at, what country, every country, tailors the education to their country. So the US, we all know, doesn't share all the information from the slave trade, right? The
Mhm, mhm,
positioning of it is very slim.
mhm,
Well, being that we are of Haitian descent, I started teaching my son about Haiti's role in US history. We talked about this before.
mhm,
I started teaching my son Haiti's role in South American history.
Mm-hmm.
I started teaching my son the connection between Haiti and Africa, right? Haiti being of the Caribbean islands, the closest to the culture within Africa. And so at first, my son had a hard time digesting what I was saying. And this was young. This is
Yeah.
when I felt that his identity was being compromised.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to find ways to teach him his history so that he can be anchored and proud of who he was. So what did he do? Went to his teachers. Did you know about this? Yes, that's true.
Mm.
So my position in his life now shifted.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is my father someone who's going to buy something for me or play basketball with me, my father is someone I can talk to about what I'm learning. Is that making sense?
Man, it makes perfect sense. It does. It does. And I love the example that you just gave. And I want to add to that as well, because the listeners and people who are listening in, we want to educate them, right? We want to motivate
Sure.
them. We want to give some information. So for me, what that looked like, how you
Mhm.
taught your son the things that schools or traditional education or other people weren't teaching him. You decided to teach him. So I can't take the credit for this. Myself, my brothers, my cousins, my family, we're all really tight. So 9 grandchildren grew up. We grew up like siblings, although we were
Mhm.
cousins. And so somehow we came up with the idea amongst us to have our grandmother sit down and talk to all the grandchildren and her great grandchildren. So what we did was we brought them all to the house. We had grandma sit in the chair in the corner. We sat in the room and we had our children sit on the floor, and we let grandma tell them about sharecropping and the experience she had firsthand.
Mhm.
We had
Listen.
our grandmother tell them about the experience of picking cotton and putting it in the bag and how big the bag was, and the bag was twice her size, and she used to have to drag that bag. And then we allowed our children to ask her questions so they got a
Wow.
chance to learn the
Wow.
information firsthand,
Wow.
and then ask the things that they might have been thinking that we might have never thought to even tell them. So in real time, I know one of the ways, you look like you ready to go. I'm gonna let you go and go.
No. Go ahead, brother.
One of the things I did learn at UB, we went to UB together.
Mhm.
And one of my courses, when I took African American Studies, one of the professors I remember said to me, there's a lot of information that you can learn in books, but I want you to find the oldest person in your family and go ask them questions. And
Listen.
so now I began to find educators who did look like me. And I asked my grandfather, did you ever drink from a Black only water fountain? So it's one thing to read it in the book.
Yeah.
It's one thing to see it in the movie.
Mhm.
It's another thing when your grandfather tells you he drank from a Black only water fountain, or when your grandfather tells you that when he came back from the military with his uniform on, he still sat in the back of the bus. This ain't no book.
Yeah.
This person I'm talking to.
Los.
So I
So
love how
what
you
you're
said that
Mhm.
we are educating and we're teaching information other people are not finding out. Go ahead, please go.
Yeah, we are educators. As
Yeah.
as Black dads, as Black fathers, as men in a position to influence our youth, we are educators. And the value of what we educate, I would almost challenge, supersedes my child knowing the Pythagorean theorem,
Mm,
right? There's a place for physics, there's a place for algebra. I will not discount that as someone who studied math, but I will place greater emphasis on
mhm,
what I'm teaching. So to piggyback off of that, because we talked about learning from our elders and learning from other men in our family, and even elders being your grandmother and other men. But one of the things that I also started realizing as my children went to school, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, who's teaching them discipline? Who's teaching
mm,
them resilience? Who's teaching them fortitude? Who's
mhm,
teaching them respect? Who's teaching them integrity? So I started, and hopefully we got time to talk about it today. I started raising my company almost like a corporation. And that
mhm,
sounds a little bit distant, but hear me out. The first thing I did was lay out a vision. First thing I did.
mhm.
Second thing, and this is me and my children's mother. And the second thing I did is I started writing out core values.
And this is for
Eh,
your children.
My children. I kept on
Gotcha. Because
repeating.
you said you was raising your company like a corporation. You
I
were
was
raising
raised.
your children
Sorry.
and your
Thank you for
family. I want to
catching
make
me.
sure we got you.
I
Yep.
was excited, Los, man, but now the whole world knows I messed up. Thank you.
No,
So
I'm clearing it up for that, so they know what we're talking about.
No. I heard you. I heard you. First, you tell everybody where I went to college, put my business out there. Then you gonna tell everybody my real name, right?
Oh, I
Okay.
got some more. I'm gonna tell them a little bit later. I'm really gonna say it, but you go ahead. I'm really gonna tell them the goods.
But staying on that topic, I started raising my children like a corporation. And folks, if you're listening, just let me get to the end. First thing is I had to have a clear vision.
Mhm.
What was the vision that I had for my family and my children? Then the next thing I did was, what were our core values? What were the core values that were going to hold me accountable and that would repeat over and over and over? My children could tell you verbatim, uh, did we get better today? I wasn't thinking big movements. Did we take advantage today and did we get better today? Because I
Mhm.
wanted them to be able to reflect on the day and take either big wins or small wins. But every day was an opportunity to get better,
Mhm.
right? Attitude will either open or close doors for you. These are slogans. I'm repeating it to my 1-year-old, my 2, my 3. As attitude will open or close doors for you. And consistently, because I realized I had to prepare them. I had to teach them. There goes that word again, very similar to the first segment. I had to teach them qualities of life. Then I had to teach them thinking. So my kids never had PlayStation, none of these video games. And trust me, I would hear it from my family all the time. But as a father, we played board games religiously. I bought
Mhm.
Monopoly. I bought any game that required them to make decisions.
That's good.
And when you have kids that span certain ages, the youngest don't ever want to be left out. So come on, sweetheart. Oh, I call her queen. Come on, queen, let's go. And I started putting in infrastructure, processes that would allow them to flourish. And then me as an educator, I had to sit back almost with a curriculum and say, how am I going to adapt this lesson plan for this particular child or for that child?
That's
And
good.
and I honestly believe the reason why my children are in a place where they come back and tell me what they learned and what they were excited about learning was because I didn't put emphasis on grades. It was, how are you going to approach? So another core value was your approach to learning. Excuses only favor those who give them, or only
Mhm.
satisfy those who give them. And
Mhm.
so these are things I started realizing I'm that first educator in their house, in their family, in their lives. Sorry. And the educators in their school are there to support me as opposed to I'm there to support them.
Right, definitely. I love that because
Mhm,
what I'm hearing you say is, how many times have you heard a person say, "Hey, my father said this." I
mhm,
say all the time, you hear me, my grandfather said. Like, I'm writing my third book is called My Grandfather Said because I say it so much. What I'm hearing
mhm,
is, I see the day, right, in the future where your children are going to be saying, "Well, my father always said." What my father always said. And so you're
mhm,
giving them vision, you're giving them mission. We also, for me, what that triggered is the affirmations. Same here, man. My children watch this with my children. We go through these affirmations and then drop them off from school. I'm anointed, I'm blessed, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy, I'm a success, I'm successful, I'm prosperous, I live in abundance right now for the rest of my life.
mhm,
So be it in Jesus' name. If my children heard me start that, they could finish it at age
mm,
2 and age 3, my children can go ahead and finish it. It's an affirmation that sticks with them. That if I sit with
mhm,
them to this day and I began saying that, they'll just fall right in the line and start saying that. So that is something that I've taught them that's going to stick with them. And I hear you saying, which was beautiful. I don't know if I've ever heard it like that before. You were raising your children like a corporation. When we have a corporation, we give a mission, we give a vision, we put structure to it, we aim it in a certain way and direct it a certain way. But how many of us are doing that with our families? So I commend you for that. I hear you in saying that. It triggered the affirmations I taught to my children, but it also pushed me to say, hey, man, I need to establish a vision and mission for my children as well. I like the way that you're raising your children. I like the information that you're giving to them, but that's powerful. That's powerful because I have a lot of friends. Well, scratch that. I won't say a lot because unfortunately, a lot of our friends didn't have their father-in-law. I
Mhm.
do have friends that often refer to one of my best friends here in this area where I live now, who often refers to my dad always said this. My dad always said this. My dad always said this. Another relative of mine talks about their parent and says, "Man, I wish I listened more to them when I was younger because everything
Mm.
that they said was right." So that's another thing for the person who's listening, the parent who's listening, the father
Yeah,
who's listening. You feel
yeah.
like your child may not be listening to you. They're gonna come back to it. What's the scripture say? Raise up a child in the way he should go when he's old, he should not depart from it. They will come back to what we teach them. But like we said earlier, they need to have something to come back to. And I love what you said that the school system is not there to teach them. You're there to teach them and prepare them to send them to maybe an education system that's going to reinforce what you've already done for them. I commend you on that, Brad.
Yo, listen. Let's take time to commend any father that's trying, right?
That's
I,
good.
I think I think we want to pause and say because I know I'm fortunate, right? That I've been able to gain my degrees and expand my thought process. But I also want to encourage any father out there. My father, and I won't put his business out there. He was my first educator, and I didn't know I was being taught.
Mm.
No idea I was being taught until today when I had to teach my kid, and I'm sitting here and my encyclopedia, my reference points was my dad. Everything he was teaching me.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, I think maybe 2 months ago I started the fact check. I was like, no way. And when I ran down that list, I was like, holy cow.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was teaching me, I have a sense of identity and a sense of pride in who I am and where I come from.
That's good.
And so that's important. But I also want to kind of add this to this, Los, because I want to make sure we issue the challenge out. Folks, teach your children about entrepreneurship.
Ooh.
Teach it, folks. The principles of entrepreneurship will suit them well wherever they go. Remember, I told you about stretching the box. Most people say
Yeah.
think outside the box. Okay, great. I want to stretch your box
Mm-hmm.
so that this whole world is your playground. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, most
And
definitely.
and so with my children, my son doesn't want to get into business, which is fine. But with my children, I always had them thinking in that capacity. Right. Okay. Why not own it? Why not create it? Why not build it? You want what is it? Chapstick, lip gloss? Let's make it. Right? You want bracelets? Let's make it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you ask me for, let's make it. You get what I'm saying?
I do, man. So the beauty of what I hear you saying, and something we had touched on, we didn't touch
Mhm.
on. I want to bring it into this show
Mhm.
because we've been in this space already. And when I hear you talking about the entrepreneurship, I hear you teaching and instructing and preparing your children,
Mhm.
teaching our children to think. And then what triggered that is what you said, which was so powerful. That a lot of traditional educational structures, they teach children how to remember. They don't teach them how to learn. So when we're teaching our children, and some of the things you just said with the entrepreneurship, is we're teaching them to actually think. Like, I want to
Close.
teach my child to actually think. Some people don't think. Mankind, I believe it's Earl Nightingale that says
Mhm.
the problem with mankind is they don't think. Go ahead.
So what's interesting, and I'm trying not to put my son on blast too much, right? But he's the first one, so
Yeah.
he went through it. I switched schools. My son switched schools, and my son was excellent student when he was younger. He can memorize anything.
Mm,
It stuck to him like there was nobody's business. However, when he switched to a different school that was more critical thinking based, it took us 3 years to deprogram him and
mm.
reprogram him.
Wow.
Right. And I don't want to make it seem so cold and calculated or callous, whatever the term I'm trying to remember right now. It literally took us 3 years for him to get out of the mindset of trying to memorize and get an answer right,
Mhm,
as opposed to saying, well, what is this question actually asking me? And
mhm.
embracing going down a wrong path for future opportunities or possibilities on that wrong path. And then I started really contrasting the education in the communities. So I'm not gonna say a lot of kids, but I will say in certain urban communities with the resources provided to us, with the structure given to us, our kids are forced to memorize answers, right? And so this is why I say you have to teach your kids how to think. And this is why I say I use board games. Why did you do that? Why did you buy that house?
Right.
I use a game now, cash flow, now that my kids are bigger. And why would I do this investment? It's not that I want you to have money. I just want you to ask why.
Right.
And so that's why I just want to chime in. I didn't want to cut you off, brother, but this is one of the
No.
things that stuck in my, stuck with me, because I said, holy cow, my son can memorize. And then when he's playing the guitar, when I said, well, why don't you teach yourself some more stuff? He couldn't do it. He could not look at a video and teach himself. And that's neither bad nor there. And maybe when we bring in the experts, they can speak to that a little bit more.
Right.
But I just noticed that it took us roughly 2 to 3 years actually, to get him to shift his mindset. So if we're doing that with a teenager, imagine with an adult shifting our mindsets.
Right.
This is why we have fear and trepidation and we want security, right?
Yeah.
That's another conversation for another day. And so this is why I sit there and say, teaching your kids how to think by challenging their thought process, getting them to read is huge, Los. Huge.
Yeah, it is. And teaching them to think, this is one thing that I've said, we discussed this, I believe, in a bit, not on the session here or one of the sessions. When I teach my children to think, I want them to think. Your mind is very powerful, right? There's a scripture that says, think differently, change your mind, right? Actually think. I tell my children right now, you hear the saying, is the glass half empty, is the glass half full? I teach my children, where did water come from? No,
Let's stop right there, Los, because you may have lost people. You may have lost people, right?
So they hear the term, well, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? And you hear that. And some people say, I think it's half empty. Oh, so other people say, I think it's half full. I teach my children, no, ask where the water came from. Because if it's half empty, I want to know where the water came from so I can fill it up. If it's half full, where the water come from so I can fill it up even more? I want them to think past what you're seeing right in front of you. One of my mentors taught me, if you put $100 on the table and $50 on the table, which one do you take? The answer is both. Right? Think differently. Change your mind.
This is me when I was younger. I would take the table too.
Take the table too. Think
Everything coming home with
differently.
me.
Last thing, or our last one I'll bring up. They say if you can't chase 2 rabbits because you might lose both of them. I say, well, what if you're fast enough? I want you to think. I want my children, and I believe what we're saying, I know what we're saying is we want to challenge them to think past surface level, to think deeper than what you see, to allow this beautiful and powerful mind that you have to process. One of the worst things that we could say or teach our children to say or illustrate before them is, I can't. Because if you say that, your mind immediately shuts down and your mind is not trying to find a solution. But if you switch that to how can I, now your mind is trying to figure out how to get an answer to this problem, even though you may not have the answer quite yet. So we're teaching our children to think. I got one more example I want to close out with, but I'm going to let Chase, if you guys say something, it's a good one. It's about you too.
So you know what? I'm practicing now because I see you're going to keep coming with grandfather quotes and all these book quotes, right? So I'm going to quote Dr. Reverend A.R. Bernard. The quality of your thoughts affects the quality of your life.
I love it.
You get what I'm saying?
I love it.
And I'll take you down this little path with my daughter, right? And again, I'm learning and I'm watching, right? That's the purpose of a father, right? If you're going to lead, you're vigilant, right? Your eyes always on the prize, so to speak. My daughter was horrible in math, because the problems were challenging. Because the beautiful part about math, it presents problems to you in unconventional means, right? We use variables, 3x plus x squared, and you're like, what, huh? Because x is not a number, you can't see, it's an unknown. And I watched her do work, and it wasn't good, but I wasn't going to say it wasn't good because she was trying. And eventually it clicked how to attack problems, how to look for consistent principles within mathematics. So it wasn't memorizing, right? It was, I'm looking at this and how can I attack this differently? And I'm going to attack it 3 or 4 different ways. And when I saw that, I said, I don't care what your grades are ever going to be. I didn't tell her this, but I've seen enough to know now you're going to be okay. And, you know, lo and behold, then she went to tutors to have people support her thought process or give her a different perspective on thinking. And now her grades have shot up. She's 2 years removed from college, but I'm sitting here like, I'm not going to have a problem with you.
Right.
Because now you've, on your own, you think for yourself and you find help for yourself.
That's powerful.
You know what I mean?
I want to end with this, man. I had a story. I'm gonna hold off. I'm be good to our
Share
listeners.
your story, man. This is our show. We own this.
I shared another episode. I'm sharing another episode. I want to give a tip. And I want you to give, if you have a tip that you want to give to them as well, just something practical that we can give to our listeners, to our fathers who may be thinking, okay, that's good. There's a lot of great information here. What's something I can actually do? For me, one thing that I did, you and I talked about this before, is I remember there was a summer where I paid my children, right, to read books. And for every book that they read, they had to come and write 2 paragraphs at least summarizing what they read in the book, and I would pay them per book. So let's say it was $20 or $30. I can't remember the exact amount. So now the money's up to you, right? I'm educating you. I'm giving you an incentive to learn. And then when you're writing a summation, you're also showing me what you learned. And now I'm incentivizing you by giving you money, and the dollar amount is up to you. So I just want to give that as some practical advice or some tip that you could actually do with your children. I did it with my children. One of my daughters did about 4 or 5 books. My other side, you had to at least do one. One of my children did like 1 or 2. But what's some practical tips, advice, man, that you may give that something that you may have done with their children that you can give to other fathers?
I'm going to give you 2.
Okay.
Very similar to you. What I read somewhere years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I don't know who it is, and I wish I can give them the credit. But it was about giving your children allowances for doing chores, right? And the person says, I'm not going to give my child an allowance for throwing out the trash because that may set their expectation career-wise, right? And I wish I can get it right. Where I'm going with this is it sparked thinking in my head, and I'm going to speed this up. Trust me. I created a list that the kids can see. And I said, I'm going to pay you for life skills. If you build a website, I'll pay you this much. If you cook dinner, I'll pay you this much. So they had a menu. If they wanted money, they had to develop a life skill. Right. And I was willing to pay fair market value.
Come on now.
Right. So it was, if you do this, because it's not easy, but if you want the money, I know if you do it, I'll pay you. I'll pay you $400, $500 to do a website, which isn't fair market value, but for a kid, yes, you know. But I know when it's done, you've taught yourself how to do it. And so I emphasize that a great, great deal. Second one, folks, and I'll make this real quick, put your kids in sports. What sports does, it gives your child immediate feedback. Because a lot of things we do as a parent is towards a goal when they're 18, 20, 21, 30. Kids can't think that far out. You always have to remember your child's mind is not fully developed, right? That it's not. So they can't comprehend everything you're saying when you're saying it. However, if you put them in sports and they get faster tomorrow, they can equate working hard or doing this exercise led to results. It's a way to get immediate feedback and create self-esteem. And again, you're educating them on basic principles that are necessary for success. So that's it for me, Los.
Man, super dope. Listen, I'm gonna go watch and listen to this again myself. Real talk. This has been a lot of great information. Share this with somebody. If you're watching it, like, subscribe, click the notification so that whenever we have another episode, you are notified when it comes on. But share this with somebody. If you're listening on the podcast as well, share this with a father, share this with a son, share this with somebody that this could benefit from. This information will help them, man. That's the reason why we're here. We are Black Dad Unfiltered. Thank y'all for joining us again.
Let's go. Let's grow. Let's get it.
Y'all be blessed.
Let's go. Let's go.